Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of my new podcast, the Miami Book Hub, your home for readers, writers, and resources. So I couldn't think of anyone better to have on my first show than my guest to my right here. He is not only an author, but he is my friend and my neighbor, and we'll get to him in a second. But I am J. Adrian Betancourt, also an aspiring author, urban planner by day, writer by night, and a lover of reading and all things books. So it's really great to have Al Ovies here. We'll call him Adolfo once, and then Al the rest of the time.
That sounds good to me.
Al, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So as I said, we've been neighbors now for a couple of decades,
Yeah.
and we're still friendly, which is amazing in this day and age. So
considering that we don't have a single opinion that we share.
no, right? Except for a love of books.
Love books.
And actually, I have to say, Al, it is because of you that I was inspired to finally put pen to paper and write my own book. So I want to thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And but I'm nowhere near as prolific as you are. Number one, mine is still in the process of being published, whereas you actually have 2 published already, a 3rd in the way, and a 4th in the works. So let's start with your series. You are a Civil War buff. You could tell the audience how you came to be that as a Cuban from Miami. It's kind of interesting, right? Because not a lot of Civil War, artifacts or battlefields or interest in South Florida. But you were actually raised somewhere else. So before we get into the books, let's talk about you. Tell us your story.
We left Cuba in 1960. Even before, just after Castro took over.
How old were you?
I was 6 or 7.
Wow, okay.
And my grandmother was married to an American, and they lived in Connecticut. And when we came over, we stayed with her, and we lived in Connecticut for quite some time. And the Gettysburg battlefield was pretty close by, close enough to be able to take a trip down there as part of one of our family vacations. And once I went to Gettysburg, I just got bit big time by the Civil War bug, and in particular, the Custer bug, because he made his name at Gettysburg.
Yeah, and so the little people know about Custer is Custer's last stand. But there's so much more to the man, obviously, both in the Civil War and post-Civil War. And your book really explores him and his relationship with some other generals, and you explore that over 3 volumes, because I guess there's a lot to mine there, much more so than people might think. So tell us about your series and why you focus on General Custer in particular.
It's kind of like a strange story in a sense. Shortly after the Little Bighorn, there was going to be a statue put up at West Point. And Libby Custer, George Custer's wife, hated it from the time she saw it. She wasn't consulted in its design or anything, and she hated it. And at that time, William Tecumseh Sherman was commander of the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. And she wrote Sherman a letter about the statue, and she wrote about the fact that Wesley Merritt was Custer's enemy.
Okay.
And to me, that was like the crux of the whole thing, because, you're always looking for that little edge that makes your books different. And the fact is, there's like hundreds and hundreds of books written about George Custer and only one book about Wesley Merritt.
Interesting.
So in actuality, this is like a double biography, a duo biography. I have George Custer, Wesley Merritt, and how they developed such a dysfunctional relationship over the Civil War. Custer was really rankled by the fact that he had graduated 1 year after Wesley Merritt from West Point, and therefore throughout their time together, Wesley Merritt was always Custer's superior officer, and he just hated that. And he did everything he could to the point of insubordination to befuddle Wesley Merritt. And theirs was definitely a rancorous relationship.
Would it be fair to say that the book, and by the way, I don't know if we even mentioned the name of the book or the series. It's The Boy Generals. To your point, you're studying these, we call them boys because they were very young, right? How old were they in that time period?
Custer was 23, Merritt was 27.
That's incredible. And so really it's a study of them as individuals and then their relationship, kind of in the context of the Civil War and post-Civil War, right?
There's so much written about Custer and the Little Bighorn that I definitely made a point of shying away from the Little Bighorn, right, and focus strictly on Custer during the Civil War. And there's very few books that have been written, certainly none as in-depth as my trilogy, because I mean, I've got, 3 volumes dealing with Custer's Civil War career, and it spans, from the time at West Point all the way through to the surrender at Appomattox, and then the episode of the Grand Review after the close of the war. And I touched just a little bit in the conclusion about, how the Custer legend developed and things like that.
Now, did you, when you embarked on this journey, did you know it was going to be a 3-volume series, or did you just get so inspired by what you were learning that like this has to, keep going? There's too much story for one book. It has to be.
I actually self-published, single-volume work entitled Cross Sabers, George Custer and the Shenandoah Valley Campaign, and I use that as the basis for volumes 2 and 3. But once I started writing it, there was such a wealth of material. Like I say, there's hundreds of books written about George Custer. So, and nothing written, only one biography written about Wesley Merritt. So it kind of, it was just it was the edge that I was looking for, that little bit of difference that would set my book aside from all the others that had come before it.
And not to give away probably a key plot point in the books, but where did that relationship kind of hit, its climax in terms of the conflict or something,
Well, the climax was during the Appomattox campaign, where Custer was deliberately insubordinate to Wesley Merritt. He had sent orders to Custer to let another division take the lead, and Custer just sent back the messenger to Merritt and told him he was advancing on the Appomattox Railroad Station, and that he spurred his horses onto a gallop to ensure that Merritt would never get back to him. And it was just, just continuous throughout the war. And I have to say, the insubordination really stemmed from Custer. He was the instigator of what was termed a spirited rivalry, but was actually much worse than that. And so,
now you did a lot of research, and I can attest to this because I could see you kind of hold up in your house just writing away. And you must have a love of research to have done as much as you have. That research also took you to places, to battlefields, to libraries. What are some of the interesting experiences that you have had in writing the book and even promoting it? Because you've also been on the speaker circuit and have been, to different places. What are some of the more interesting places or experiences you've been to?
A lot of my travels to the battlefields were in conjunction with my friend and mentor, the late Eric J. Wittenberg, who wrote over 23 books on the Union cavalry during the Civil War. And he and I used to go to, we've been to Gettysburg together. We've been to Trevilian Station. We've been to the Shenandoah Valley, the battles of Cedar Creek, Winchester. He and I traveled all over as part of a group called the Chambersburg Civil War Foundation. They sponsored tours, so I went with them. Eric was always, because of his reputation for the 23 books that he wrote and his meticulous research, he mentored me, and he and I would travel from place to place. We'd have hotel rooms next to each other, and we'd get together at nights and talk over. He was very much, it took him a while to really come to appreciate Custer's part in the cavalry operations. He was a proponent of a guy by the name of John Buford, and he ended up writing a book about Buford. But he and I would spend the evenings discussing the pros and cons. And finally,
picture it with a glass of bourbon in your hands, right?
Finally, he admitted, he said he had made a mistake, and he really had come to appreciate Custer's part in his actions in the Civil War.
Did he write any of your forwards?
As a matter of fact, he did.
That's great.
He wrote the forward to book 2, I think. I'm not sure. I don't remember. The
student becomes the teacher.
Yes, yes. I miss my friend.
Yeah, I'm sure. Which of those battlefields, I'm just curious, is your favorite, and why?
Well,
it's
Gettysburg.
Choosing between children? Okay, Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, for one, because it's so well maintained. Okay. Aside from the access roads, the fields are exactly like they were back in those days. Eric was also on the board of directors for the Trevilian Station Battlefield Association, and we spent quite a bit of time at Trevilian Station, but it was a much more far-flung battlefield, and it took 2 days to capture to visit the whole thing. And like I say, if you have no sense of direction, you can get really lost in the way things developed. And then also I enjoyed very much the tour of the Appomattox campaign. Mm-hmm. My wife and I took a trip from one end of from Richmond and Dinwiddie Courthouse all the way through to Appomattox Courthouse where the surrender occurred. And we went and traveled the entire length. It was like an all-day trip.
By the way, shout out to Julie Sullivan, the great Juliet, your lovely bride, and also a wonderful neighbor of ours.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll make sure hopefully she'll see it.
Oh, she's going to watch. She's going to watch for sure. All right, so let's get off the battlefield for a second. Oh, actually, no, one last battlefield question. Have you ever been to or engaged in a reenactment? I know Civil War reenactments are very popular among the Civil War buffs, and I'm just curious. I know you collect a lot of the memorabilia. You have the hats, you have muskets.
There was a time when I was young when I participated as an extra in one of the Civil War movies. I can't remember if it was the North and South or the Blue and the Gray. It was one of the two. Patrick Swayze, and a couple others.
Cool.
But I was an extra. I ended up being a dead body on the battlefield.
That's got to be an easy part to play.
It was. No
lay there and try not to breathe too much.
That's it. No speaking lines.
So, you're a history buff, but it doesn't end with the Civil War. There's a more recent conflict that you're also passionate about and that you're also writing about. This one certainly hits closer to home to those folks here in South Florida, but yes. I would imagine hits closer to home for you personally as well. So tell us about it.
Well, actually, it was connected to the Civil War.
Was it?
I was at one of my conferences in Gettysburg, and at the hotel I stayed at, there was a bar attached to it called The Mine, and it's an old dive that's been there for forever. And one of the regular customers there was a guy by the name of William Frasinito, who is an expert on Civil War photography. And he and I got to talking, and somehow or other the conversation ended up revolved around Cubans in Vietnam. And he told me, Al, you should really you live in Miami, you speak Spanish, all the veterans of the Bay of Pigs are in Miami. You should consider writing something about the Bay of Pigs. And sure enough, I came down here and he was right. And the result is The Beaches of Glory. And the title of it is Beaches of Glory, A Military History of the Bay of Pigs. And one of the things I've done in it is I've kind of done away with the politics of it. As you can see, I'm a military historian. So my Bay of Pigs book focuses very heavily on the 3 days of the actual battle. And one of the key points is the fact that I interviewed close to 24 of the Bay of Pigs veterans, and the results from the interview are an integral part of my book on the Bay of Pigs.
Wow. And when is that scheduled to come out?
Actually, I don't even have a publisher yet.
But
I still got 2 more chapters to go.
Well, you got to finish your third volume in this series first, right?
Well, actually, I received a formatted copy of what it's going to look like, and right now I'm involved in, checking for mistakes and stuff like that. But it's formatted. It's got the maps in it. It's got the pictures in it. Everything is the way it's supposed to
on
look
the tail end
when
of
the
things. Good.
when the book is published, and it's going to be published on July 15th.
Okay. Then your trilogy is completed, and you can
trilogy
focus
is
on Bay of
complete,
Pigs.
and I'm focused on the Bay of Pigs.
Wow. Well, that's going to be really special here in Miami. I mean, that took place, what, 60, 70 years ago?
It took place in 1961.
But you still have many of them are still alive, and certainly their families,
Yes.
And I think the community in general is still very much tied to that very traumatic
Well, they've
series
done
of events.
they've done a super job of preserving the history of the Brigade 2506.
Mm-hmm.
There's a museum in Hialeah Gardens, and there's a brand new museum just off of 8th Street at their old. Used to have an old house that they had converted into a museum, and they tore that down, and they built a beautiful 3-story museum that's not open yet. It'll be open on the in the April anniversary of the battle.
Wow. Which is when? Do you know the date?
I don't know the date. I just got an invitation the other day, but I think that the grand opening is just for members of the brigade and
I
their
can
relatives.
certainly see a certain book sitting on their bookshelf when they do open.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've already got a commitment from them on it.
If there's one thing about the Bay of Pigs that you've learned that maybe people don't appreciate, what would that be? To your point, a lot has been discussed about the politics. Kennedy not sending support, what may have led to the Bay of, all that sort of. But you're focused on the military campaign. What happened on the ground? What is something that really sticks out in your mind that people should know about?
I think what I like to think is being a military historian is the actual 3 days of the battle, and plus the 2 days beforehand where there was aerial attacks on the Cuban airfields and stuff like that, and then the 3 days of the actual battle, and then I do have a chapter at the end about what happened to the survivors of the brigade, most of whom ended up spending 2 years in Castro's prisons, but several of them managed to escape in little boats and made it all the way through to the Gulf of, I'm going to call it the old Gulf of Mexico. And they were picked up, and only 7 of the 22 men actually survived. Wow. So they were picked up just off the coast of Louisiana. And
it must have been a heck of an experience to interview these guys. I mean, was there a lot of emotion, either on their part or yours, or was it just kind of strictly, here are the facts?
I don't remember them being,
Here I told you to turn off your phone, and mine is going off.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. I gave you a few extra seconds.
The only thing I can say is that these guys are dead set on, how can I put this, the legacy of the brigade, establishing the legacy of the Cuban brigade, the Brigade 2506. And these guys gave me total cooperation. Their accounts, I interviewed 24 of them, and I spent like 1.5 to 2 hours with each one of them. And I have all these personal stories of, the 3 days that they spent in Cuba, and also about the 2 years that they spent in prison afterwards. So,
and our hats off to all those guys. And
I
all those heroes.
can't say enough.
Amazing.
Can't say enough.
All right, so we talked about your books, all fascinating. So if you're interested in the Civil War, if you're interested in just relationship studies between officers, if you're interested in the Bay of Pigs, you have several books to choose from here, and Al will share with you where you can find those in a minute. But let's talk about you as a writer. So as an aspiring writer myself, I'm trying to pick up tips wherever I can. I'm sure there are a lot of folks out there who might have a story in their mind. What would be your advice, based on your experience, to a novice writer who has a story, has something they want to write? How do they get started?
I'm not going to say how you get started, because obviously every writer has a subject matter or something that they want to write about. So getting started is not the problem. The problem is you have to stick to it every day. You know, some people I know have written about the fact that they have a goal, a number of words that they have to do every day. And sometimes, you know, you get that dreaded writer's block.
It's a real thing.
And you just have to plow through it one way or the other. You know, if you can always go back and edit what you've written, but you got to continue forging ahead no matter what roadblock you encounter. You need to identify the roadblock and then just write that next sentence, because that next sentence might open up, you know, a whole new avenue of research or of writing or whatever. And it's just a matter of sticking to it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the perfect word to it, is
Discipline.
sticking to it. That's
It's a discipline.
it. You have to be disciplined. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I certainly experienced the dreaded period of, gosh, how many months where I couldn't write. I just couldn't do it. And I kind of set it aside and forgot about it. But then when I came back to it, you know, it just flowed freely. And so sometimes it's just a matter of time. I think it's okay sometimes to set it aside,
Yeah.
you know, and come back to it.
I wrote these two, volumes 1 and 2 of the Custer Merritt story. And then I got sidetracked because of my visit at Gettysburg with Frasinito, and got started on this Beaches of Glory, the Bay of Pigs. And I worked on that until I had, 17 chapters or so. And then I went back and revisited volume 3 of the Custer Merritt series. And the time spent away from it kind of cleansed my mind a little bit. And I think my volume 3 is probably, I'm reading it now because I'm reviewing it for the formatting, but to me, it's some of the best writing I've done.
Now, do you have a particular routine when you're writing? I mean, are you like, you know, do you set aside a time of day? Are you a morning guy or an evening guy? Or you just kind of get to it when you get to it? Like, what's your routine?
I'm definitely a morning guy.
Yeah.
I get up, I drink 2 or 3 cups of coffee, and then I get started right away. And like I say, I don't have a number of words that I need to write per day. I don't have it that regimented, but you know, a lot of my time is spent researching, reading books, trying to find new avenues of approach to the problems, you know, to the stories I'm trying to tell. And that's how I look at it, is I'm not writing a history book with, you know, the first division moved to the right flank and did this. And I'm trying to tell a personal story of the people involved in the actions, like Custer and Merritt. I use dozens and dozens of accounts from people who were there, who left stories. And obviously, you know, there's no chance of interviewing any of them, but, you know, the material is there. So you just kind of have to, you have to be, to write history, you have to be a great researcher.
Yeah, you have to love
it. You know,
that's
the main thing, is you got to have a body of knowledge that you can then, with a degree of confidence, know that you're on the right path.
And there's a responsibility, right, when you're writing historic fiction, because you want to get it right. A, because you're leaving behind that as your personal legacy, but also, you know, this is what people are going to come to believe happened. And you owe them, you know, the most accurate depiction possible, which takes a great deal of research. And then I would imagine there's also the added pressure of, there are a lot of people who know their stuff about the Civil War.
Oh, yes.
And you want to impress them. You certainly don't want them coming out and say, well, you got that wrong.
Yeah. One of the things that is important to me is the research in presenting not just the point you're trying to make, but opposite points of view. And like, for instance, in the Boy Generals, I write not just from the Union perspective, but I also write with a lot of perspective from the Confederate side of the thing. And the same token, on my Bay of Pigs book, I not only focus on the Brigade 2506 and its members, but I also have read a lot of the books published by the Cuban government, Fidel Castro. You know, you have, the stories you're trying to tell is only as good. You have to have a great opponent in order for your actions to be glorious.
Yeah.
You know, in order for you to have that fame, you need to have a good opponent. And in this case, you have to present both sides. And I go out of my way to make sure that I present both sides.
Now, there's a trend in historical fiction, historical writing now to kind of blend some fiction and nonfiction. And so I'm a big fan of Ed Larson. And, he obviously writes about historical periods, but then he kind of fills in the blanks on things that may have been said or may have happened, in a conversation that no one was privy to. Do you include any of that in your book, or do you
No.
stick strictly to the facts?
I stick strictly to the facts. Every time I put something into a quote, at the bottom of the page, I have a footnote that clearly identifies my source material. Yeah. If you're writing fiction, you might as well call it fiction. Yeah. It's not history anymore. If you're making up conversations, then it's no longer a true historical accounting of the events that you're trying.
Historical fiction.
Yes, you need to call it historical fiction.
And this is why I'm glad I'm writing fiction. You could just make things up.
You can.
It's very liberating.
One of these days, I hope to try my hand at at fiction.
What kind of fiction? Do you have any interest in particular, sci-fi, or stick to kind of military adventures, or like what do you think you might write about?
I'm writing a story of 5 brothers that come over from Cuba.
You're already writing it.
I've already got a good outline.
Okay.
I've got the chapters, what I intend to accomplish. It's called Journey Through the Shadows of the Law.
Wow.
And it's about 5 brothers, and the narrator is the only one left after many years, and each one explores a different area of American history, Vietnam, the Bay of Pigs, things like that, where they're actually in there, and I create dialogue. It's just, like you say, it's historical fiction.
That's interesting. So you're spending so much time writing. My gosh, you're finishing your 3rd book. You're writing Bay of Pigs. You already have this fiction in the work. Do you ever have time to actually read, other than the research for your books? So do you get to enjoy a book for pleasure, or do you ever have the time?
Yes, as a matter of fact.
So what are you reading?
I am extremely fond of an English guy named Griff Hosker, Hosker.
Okay.
And he was a professor, English professor, until he retired. And then he started writing history books of major events in English history. And he publishes mostly in Kindle, so you get the books pretty cheap. But he's written dozens and dozens of books. He's covered the Viking era. He's covered the medieval era. He's covered the Battle of Slandawana and Rorke's Drift during the Anglo-Zulu Wars. He's written about World War I, World War II. He's just a prolific writer. He must write a book a week. And he creates dialogue and throws in the facts. And then at the very end, he explains how, what's true, what's fictionalized in the interest of a dramatic presentation, stuff like that. But the guy is just an amazing writer. If he doesn't have 50 published books,
well,
I don't know how many he's got. But I read him every night just before going to sleep. I have it on my phone on Kindle. I get the books pretty cheap, and I read 8-9 pages at night before I go to sleep.
That's great. I don't find the time to read anymore. I'm just trying to write, and I wish I could get back to reading. I've had a book sitting on my coffee table that our joint friend Nicole gave me, and I can't even get it started. So again, got to be disciplined. Maybe turn off the tube and do that instead.
Well, yeah, like I say, it's the last thing I do before I go to sleep. I read a lot of Bernard Cornwell, who he writes historical fiction. He wrote the Last Kingdom series with Uhtred of Babenberg. He wrote the Rifleman Sharp series about the Napoleonic Wars. He's written several books about American history and the Vikings, stuff like that. Yeah. But the guy it's what you call historical fiction. He makes up dialogue.
Oh, it's fun.
And it's very dramatic and very impactful.
Yeah. So you and I have that joint love of history. Where do you think yours originated from? Is this something your parents passed on to you, or maybe it was that visit to Gettysburg?
It was definitely the visit to Gettysburg, although I did have a foretaste of it in Cuba. Like I remember watching the Earl Flynn movie about George Custer called They Died with Their Boots On.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching that in Cuba in English with Spanish subtitles. And this was before 1960, because we came over in 1960, and I know I watched it in Cuba. But, it's always been a historical bug for me.
All right, we're going to do a couple of rapid fire questions here.
Okay.
Favorite author, other than me?
Other than you. It's a toss-up between Griff Hosker and Bernard Cornwell.
Okay. Favorite historical figure other than Custer?
That's a tough one.
You can go back in time and meet one of them.
I would like to King Henry V.
Okay.
The Battle of Agincourt. I've seen a couple of the movies that have been written about him, and there's that famous speech where he says, "For those of you who were here today, my band of brothers," and that's where the famous quote. It's a Shakespearean thing. It
wasn't just a TV series?
No,
which was amazing. It was amazing TV series.
It was actually a Shakespeare play.
Right.
Henry V. And it was Shakespeare that came up with the speech. The speech never really existed.
It was historical fiction.
Yes, it was historical fiction.
All right. Favorite war movie?
Well, I'm not going to say it's a movie.
Or series, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it would be either Band of Brothers, or The Pacific.
Pacific was excellent.
The Pacific was awesome. It was based on 3 books by men who had fought in the Pacific campaign, whereas Band of Brothers was just about a single unit. The Pacific was about 3 different divisions of U.S. Marines operating in the Pacific, and it's just incredible.
Both were amazing. And then I remember this clearly because we had just gotten our surround sound and our new television, and we brought you over to watch Pacific, and it was an experience, right? And I think it blew you away.
I mean, it captures you right from the soundtrack. The soundtrack introduction was just fantastic.
It was excellent.
The charcoal sketches of the people, the Marines in action, stuff like that. It was just great series.
Well, Al, that is all the time we have here on the Book Hub. So I want to thank you again for appearing as my guest. I want to thank you for everything you've done to capture both of these amazing conflicts and to share the stories. And I want to thank you for being my friend and neighbor.
Okay. Well, you want the information on how to get these books?
Yes, please.
Okay. My publisher is Ted Savis of Savis Beatty LLC, and that is his website is spelled SAVASBEATIE.com.
So they go on the website, they can find your book there.
Yes.
It's also available on Amazon, but I think you get better share the profits on there, right?
Well,
stick to the website,
probably,
folks.
Yes.
Nice shout out to the publisher there as well. All right. Well, that's all the time we have here on the Miami Book Hub. I want to thank, again, Al, for being my first ever guest. No one could ever take that away from you. And I want to invite you all to join us here in the future. We have the executive director of the Miami Book Fair. We have the director of the Miami-Dade County Public Library System booked. And we hope to have many wonderful guests, those who've written, those who publish, those who sell books. This is meant to be kind of a conversation with the entire literary community. If you want to appear as a guest on the program, if you've written a book or if you're involved in the community, please reach out to me. You can find me at j.adrian@threetreasurespress.com. So folks, thank you for joining us. We'll see you here next time. And in the meantime, keep reading, start writing, and stay curious, Miami.